So connect the dots for us and tell the significance of the fact patterns that are starting to get unraveled. Why is this a big deal?
It's a big deal because I have a saying, the FBI used to spy on the Russians. This time they spied on us. What this story is about, it's about a brazen plot to, again, exonerate Hillary Clinton from a clear violation of the law with regard to the way she handled classified information with her private server. Absolutely a crime, absolutely a felony. It's about finding out why, as the Inspector General is doing at the Department of Justice, why Comey and the senior DOJ officials conducted a fake criminal investigation of Hillary Clinton, followed none of the regular rules, gave her every break in the book, immunized all kinds of people, allowed the destruction of evidence, no grand jury, no subpoenas, no search warrant. That's not an investigation. That's a Potemkin village. It's a farce, and everybody knew it was a farce. The problem was she didn't win. And because she didn't win, the farce became a very serious opera. It wasn't a comic opera anymore. It was a tragic opera, and she was going to be the focus. What this is about a lavabo, a cleansing of the FBI and the upper echelons of the Department of Justice. We're going to discover that the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, her deputy, Sally Yates, the head of the National Security Division, John Carlin, Bruce Orr, and other senior DOJ officials and, regrettably, line attorneys, people who were senior career civil servants, violated the law, perhaps committed crimes, and covered up crimes by a presidential candidate. But more than that, they tried to frame an incoming president with a false Russian conspiracy that never existed, and they knew it, and they plotted to ruin him as a candidate and then destroy him as a president. That's why this is important. That's why connecting the dots is important, because the FBI now has to be completely reconstructed from the ground up. The men and women at the Bureau are great people. That's not who we're talking about. We never have been. We are talking about people like James Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Baker, Prystepp, who was a name nobody knows. He's the head of the Counterintelligence Division, and he was the one who was involved in planning this entire crazy thing involving Fusion GPS, the false dossier, and creating evidence. This is what people have to understand. What the Bureau did was, by working with Fusion GPS and giving contractors access to highly classified information which they had no legal right to see, they needed to create something they could give to the court, the Foreign Intelligence Court, so that they could get wiretaps and surveillance taps and email taps and phone taps on the Trump people, so that if there was anything, they could find it out. Of course, there was nothing. There never was anything. And they created false facts so that they could get surveillance warrants. Those are all crimes. Every single one of those acts constitutes a crime because it was done not for a legitimate law enforcement reason, not for national security reasons, but to create a false case against a candidate, Donald Trump, a president-elect, Donald Trump, and a president, Donald Trump. The FISA Court opinion of April 27th of 2017 outlines a series of illegal disclosures to contractors. It is believed that among those contractors were Fusion GPS and CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is the company that was used to bleach Hillary's computer. CrowdStrike, if what is being reported is true, and I've seen 2 reports about CrowdStrike being among the private contractors that were given access to raw 702 incidental collection of American citizens under FISA warrants. If that is true, they have committed crimes. The Bureau who gave them information committed crimes. There is huge civil liability for CrowdStrike and for the FBI officials. And right now, there's at least 2 lawsuits pending against Mr. Steele, the former MI6 agent who wrote the Steele dossier, at the payment of Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS has been sued. I expect if these facts come out from the FISA Court showing that these contractors got this information, they will all be sued. Now, they may declare bankruptcy and not be able to pay, but the people don't realize that this is already on the public record, that these things happen. The question which has been blanked out from this opinion, as you can see, this is all dark, all through the opinion. What they've done is they've blanked out the names of the contractors and the names of the FBI and DOJ officials who broke the law. That is going to come out. That's what Nunes has. He has all that information now. He knows what's in these blanks that the court blanked out. The court did the right thing. It's not supposed to reveal that. But once you start doing oversight, constitutional oversight, those blanks go away to Congress. And we will know shortly who the private contractors were that were allowed to break the law by the FBI. When Comey goes to visit President Trump at the White House about the Flynn case and all that, remember, the president is president at that point. There's no reason for Comey to be doing anything. If the president wanted to meet with him, he didn't have to go. He went and he told the president, for example, about the dossier. Now, why would an FBI director tell a president about this salacious document, which Comey admitted under oath there was no proof for, no validity? He was playing J. Edgar Hoover. He was blackmailing the President of the United States. He was saying, I know all about this. Now, I'm not going to say anything about it, of course. Of course, if it ever gets out, it's just going to be awful. Do you want me to stay in my job? I mean, Comey is a person so devoid of a moral compass. He describes himself as Thomas Becket. I said to somebody the other day, he's not Thomas Becket. He's the assassin, Henry II, who killed Thomas Becket. That's who Comey is. He's an assassin. He's a political assassin.
So when you follow the money of Fusion GPS, if the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign paid Fusion GPS, and that was part of the dossier that went to the FISA court, and it also was marketed through the journalistic community. Some people think that Fusion GPS was paying a lot of left-wing journalists who became propagandists to add these things to their stories. Have you heard that?
Yeah. Well, I think the understandable storyline that Fusion GPS paid journalists to then go out and tell a story is the complete antithesis of American journalism and the First Amendment. We don't do that in this country. But if they did, and it's pretty clear that they paid a lot of money to a lot of people, among whom were some journalists, there's just no doubt about that. That's a scandal of immense proportion for the American journalism community, who seem to care little about that. The only thing the American journalism community seems to care about is destroying Donald Trump. It's fascinating to me that the people who cared so deeply about governmental institutions in Watergate could care less about them now because it's another Republican who's being destroyed. This is as bad as it gets. When you have the government, the FBI and the DOJ being absolutely corrupted because of their motivations, and when you have the journalistic community being bought, it seems to me that's pretty bad for all the institutions involved. And journalism is now below Congress in terms of approval ratings. This is not going to help them. There have been rumors about the reason GPS fought the House Intelligence Committee subpoena was to prevent, not who their clients were, that's nonsense. They were protecting the people that they paid. And it's pretty obvious that Fusion GPS, they can pay anybody they want for information. They're not a government agency. They're not buying. If they want to pay for information and they think it's truthful or not truthful, but they want it, they can do that. It's clear that the reason they tried to protect, and they went to court to try and stop the House subpoena, but they lost in front of Judge Richard Leon, was to protect to whom they were paying money to get information. I have read reports, I don't know whether they're true or not, that they paid a number of journalists to spread information about the dossier. It's not going to be long, though, because the House now has all of those records. They've been reviewed. And Devin Nunes, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, has now and will start next week briefing individual members of the House in closed sessions about what they've discovered. And I'm sure that what will leak out is who Fusion GPS paid. Fusion GPS, by the way, is really a joke. They wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times about a week ago criticizing the House committee and saying release all the transcripts and everything. Of course, everything that was released was blanked out because it had information that they wanted protected. I think that what's quite clear is that they were a private intelligence service. They sold their services to the highest bidder. That was the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee, and eventually the FBI, which used them and bootstrapped their information into FISA applications. And it is not too far astray to say that they became an arm of the conspiracy willingly and knowingly, and that they engaged in activity which was clearly designed to destroy a human being. And it's pretty clear, according to James Comey, it may be one of the few truthful things he said in all of his sworn testimony, that there's nothing verified in that report except that somebody like George Papadopoulos, Carter Page took a trip, a perfectly legal trip to Russia. Didn't do a thing wrong, didn't do anything wrong when he came back, and didn't do anything wrong before he went. Hope he wins his lawsuit.
So talk about the competing narratives in the scandal world right now, and what's the important timelines that you're watching?
Well, what's fascinating to me is how the people who want to defend everything that the Bureau has done, or the Department of Justice, or the Clintons, have turned to a series of narratives to replace the truth. For example, once this whole thing broke, when President Trump said, "I was spied on by the President of the United States," he was laughed at. In fact, he was spied on by the President of the United States, by Barack Obama, under Barack Obama's orders, and under the orders of John Brennan, and Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, and Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, and Ben Rhodes, the Deputy National Security Advisor. Because what they did, which was part of a scheme which began in the year 2016, was to try to figure out a way to help Hillary Clinton get elected by exonerating her in her email scandal in her private server in New York, and then she would be elected, and then the problem of Donald Trump would go away. The problem was she lost. And when she lost, they had time between the election in November of 2016 and the time between the president was inaugurated to try and do damage, to cover up what they had done with Fusion GPS and a bunch of other people before the election, and to make it perfect after the election, to secure the storyline. And so, interestingly enough, people, there are some real heroes in this story. And part of it is how you defeat these competing narratives. You'll recall that first there's the story about the dossier, the so-called Fusion GPS dossier, which we now know was developed with the assistance of the FBI, Christopher Steele, the former spy from England, Bruce Orr, a senior Justice Department official in the Obama administration, Bruce Orr's wife, who was an employee of Fusion GPS and a Russian expert. That all of a sudden became something that people got worried about on the Democratic side and on the protect the Clinton side. Then all of a sudden, when the dossier got even stronger and stronger as a result of the knowledge about Bruce Orr's involvement, the dialogue shifted. And then it became that the dossier really wasn't important because George Papadopoulos, this know-nothing young guy who had been an end-of-the-room foreign policy advisor, was the real guy who got the investigation into the president's collusion with the Russians started as a result of a drunken blathering in a bar to the Australian ambassador, who then told MI6 in London. These narratives have developed because the facts are now so strong that there was a brazen plot to exonerate Hillary Clinton, and then if she lost, frame the President of the United States with a false crime, that this is what they have been forced to do. One of the heroes in this entire story is Admiral Mike Rogers, the head of the National Security Agency. He became the head of the National Security Agency in 2014. In 2015, One of the auditors at the National Security Agency, our electronic surveillance SIGINT masterpiece from World War II, came to him and said, there's some funny things going on at the FBI with regard to 702, which of course is that part of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which allows the scooping up of huge amounts of phone call data and emails and electronic data about foreigners. And in the course of that, allows the incidental collection of information about Americans, which is supposed to be kept secret, but wasn't in this case because of the conduct of the FBI and the Obama administration Justice Department officials. Mike Rogers says, okay, let's do an audit. He does this in March of 2016. This is way in advance of the election. He then discovers, as a result of the audit, that the FBI has been sharing this secret data about Americans with not other government agencies, but private contractors. Some of those contractors apparently work for the Democratic National Committee. Some of them work for Fusion GPS. Mr. Rogers, Admiral Rogers, says, okay, the court, the FISA Court, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, has been lied to. They have not been told about this. And things have been told to them which are not true. He said, I'm going to the court. I'm going to tell the court. Rogers goes to the court on his own and informs the court about these problems. Now, prior to him being able to do that, the Justice Department and the FBI learn about what he's done, about the audit and what he's discovered. And so they go to the court first to inform the court that they have discovered these problems with illegal activity. Doesn't make any difference. It's too late. The court now knows what has happened. So he goes to the court, they go to the court, and then in April of 2016, the FISA Court issues this 99-page opinion, which I'll bet you didn't even know about until I talked about it this morning. This opinion describes illegal activity by the FBI, illegal activity by contractors, and it calls it the improper disclosure of raw intelligence about Americans to unauthorized individuals. All of those things that the Bureau did and the contractors were crimes. Now, you wouldn't think, this is a public document now. It's been declassified. You have not seen a single story about this in the Washington Post or the New York Times. So, with this in hand, and remember, Rogers knows all about this before the election. So as soon as the election is held, Rogers determines that since there is now a president-elect who has been spied upon, he knows that Trump was the subject of a plot. So Admiral Rogers goes to visit President-elect Trump in New York in November of 2016, on the 17th of November. He's the head of the NSA. He briefs the president. And it is after that briefing, the very next day, that President-elect Trump moves his entire staff out of Trump Tower to Bedminster, New Jersey, where his golf club is, and that's where the transition team stays until Trump Tower is debugged. What Admiral Rogers did was, and this is why the president said that President Obama had wiretapped him. Rogers, on that day, November 17th, briefed the president about the illegal activities which had been reported to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court earlier in the year. And the president knew what had happened at that point. Now, interestingly enough, when the outgoing administration found that Admiral Rogers had gone to New York, the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, John Clapper, and John Brennan, the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, asked President Obama to fire Admiral Rogers. Now, President Obama had many flaws, but he ain't no dummy. And he said, boys, it's too late. I'm not going to fire Admiral Rogers, because if I do, that'll be the only story about my last days in office, so you can forget it. And Rogers is there to this day. And when this story is written, when it's all over, the great hero will not be Robert Mueller, this crazy man that has been made the special counsel. It won't be the people on the Hill, except for Devin Nunes, who is a real hero, who has stood up under the most incredible personal attacks from real sleazeballs like Adam Schiff, this loony congressman from California. And it will be shown that Admiral Rogers saved the day by forcing the senior Justice Department officials to admit that they had done wrong things. Now, there's another fascinating part of this story. In October of 2016, when Admiral Rogers is going to the court and forcing the Justice Department to advise the court that they had submitted false documents, that they, the DOJ, had submitted, unwittingly had submitted false documents, as they say. Admiral Rogers, plans are being made to fire him at that point, which of course never go forward because of what he does by going to New York. All of this has come to a head at that point, and the court is now learning for the first time about this unbelievable activity. For the first time in the history of the FISA Court, it has been lied to, and according to the court, systematically and ongoing violations of the law. This is stunning stuff, and it's all because of Admiral Rogers. And that's where we are today. We are now at the point where Nunes has discovered this. He discovered it back in March when he went to the White House, and all of these documents were turned over to him by the incoming National Security Council staff. And so now we'll watch it play out. By the way, in October of 2016, the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the National Security Division at Justice for the Obama administration, and the person who was responsible for signing the pleadings that went to the court, was a fellow named John Carlin. Once this material was submitted to the court in October of 2016, revealing the violations of the law, Carlin resigned and has not been heard from since. No one could figure out why Carlin resigned. And I don't know why he resigned. There was plenty of time left in the administration. He just left. Now, it may have been that you resigned because you don't want to be questioned by the Inspector General, who at that point had already begun an investigation of the FBI and the DOJ senior people based on Admiral Rogers' complaints. So that's another story that's going to play out. Where is John Carlin and what is he doing?
How do you explain to people, Joe, who think that even if you talk about these things, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a wacko, you're a crazy, because everyone knows it's the Trump-Russia collusion that we should be talking about?
Well, this is the beauty of the false accusation. It goes around the world, and the truth takes a long time to catch up. The Russian collusion was a complete fabrication of the Democratic National Committee, the Clinton campaign, Fusion GPS, senior DOJ and FBI officials to create a way to dirty up Trump as a candidate and then destroy him as a president. There is literally no evidence whatsoever that has ever been produced of any conspiracy. And let me just say something that I find deeply offensive. The appointment of the special counsel was completely unnecessary. There was no need for a special counsel. I don't know why Rod Rosenstein did it, but he did it. But there was no justification for it. And in fact, in his appointment letter and memorandum about it, he admits there's no crime that's been discovered, but for political reasons, this needs to be investigated. Well, that's just utter nonsense. Look what he's done to an incoming president. Look at what he's done to the country by appointing a special counsel. That should have been handed off to a bunch of senior DOJ officials who were being monitored by a political appointee who would keep them within the legitimate bounds of an investigation. Mueller has not brought one charge involving collusion with Russians. He's never going to bring a charge involving collusion because there was none. The charges against Manafort predate his association with Donald Trump by many, many years. The lying to the FBI charge against Michael Flynn is a ludicrous charge. I know why he did it. He wanted to save his family and his son from everything. Flynn was indicted for lying to the FBI about conduct that is completely legal, talking to the Russian ambassador, talking to anybody overseas. He could do that when he was an employee of the campaign or when he was on the transition team. All of that is perfectly legal conduct. George Papadopoulos, who pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI, he lied to the FBI about perfectly legal conduct, about his contacts with people overseas. There's nothing illegal about that. Any American in the government or outside the government can communicate with any foreigner they want to. Now, if they take money and they're representing them, they have to report that. They have to, and that Manafort did not do, and so maybe there's a case there. I don't know. Who knows what the circumstances were. But the bottom line is this. Mueller and the way he has conducted his investigation is an embarrassment to anyone who's ever been a special counsel, which I was. I was an independent counsel. Hiring all of these partisan Democrats to conduct the investigation, he's not naive. Bob Mueller's been around too long. You can't be that dumb to not realize how horrible it is to have these people. These people are not biased against the president. They have an animus toward the president. There is a distinct difference. I believe that his entire investigation, Mueller's entire investigation, has been tainted by this animus. There's no way you can have people who have donated to the Clintons, donated to Obama, represented the Clinton Foundation, represented Clinton individuals in criminal investigations, and then have those people who have given to President Trump's opponent investigate President Trump. I don't know what Mueller is thinking of.
Since you're bringing up the Mueller investigation and the apparent focus on investigating Trump's Russian collusion, isn't it interesting that Mueller and Comey and Rosenstein and others were involved in a Russia collusion story for Obama Clinton?
Mueller, first of all, never should have been appointed because there was no need for a special counsel. That's number one. Number two, he never should have been appointed because he knows James Comey. They're personal and professional friends and have been so for many years. Comey is a target of this investigation. He's clearly been involved in activities which could be deemed illegal and criminal. There's no way Mueller can investigate him or anybody else at the senior people that he worked with. And yet, here he is investigating Russian collusion when he presided over, as FBI director, the investigation into Uranium One, which was a clear kickback bribery scheme by the Russians to bribe Bill Clinton as ex-president with speech money, to bribe Hillary Clinton with speech money for her husband and $145 million in contributions to the Clinton Foundation, and to get a result of selling 20% of the uranium supply of the United States to a Russian-controlled company. The notion that Mueller could investigate that, having been a party to the investigation, is ridiculous. But here's the other thing. Mueller, who was FBI director at the time, knew about the Uranium One investigation of Russian corruption and bribery. Did he go to tell James Comey or anybody at the Justice Department that this case was under investigation and that they should warn CFIUS, the committee that approves foreign investment? Did he go? And if he went to see somebody in the Justice Department, like, let's say he went to see Eric Holder, and Eric Holder, who sits on CFIUS, says, I don't think that's relevant to the sale of Uranium One. Or did Eric say, okay, fine, I'll let him know. We do not know what CFIUS was told about Uranium One. There have been published reports that they were told nothing about it. And here's the other part of this. If Mueller knew that this was there, why didn't he go to CFIUS on his own and say, I don't know what you're being told, but I'm going to report to you that this is pretty serious stuff and you need to know about it? He didn't do that. Why didn't Mueller do that? And so what we're left with is this nagging sensation that all of a sudden these really great investigators lose all of their skills and nobody talks to anybody about Uranium One. The other thing is this. Everybody always says in defense of Hillary, well, she was only one of 9. There were 9 agencies. But they forget the most important fact of all. It only takes one vote to stop a deal. Hers. And you know what? She was bought. She wasn't going to vote no. She knew about the bribery that was going on. Her husband was involved in it. She could have stopped the Uranium One sale with one vote. That's all it takes in CFIUS. If one member of CFIUS, 1 of 9, says no, it is done. She didn't vote no, and she could have. So the answer to this is, it's not that she was 1 of 9. It's that she was one of 9 and she didn't stop it.
So if the House were to turn over to the Democrats after the midterm elections, what are the stakes for the truth that we're trying to get told in these investigative matters?
Well, that's why it's important for the House to complete its work now and not wait any longer. I mean, it's clear that Adam Schiff and the Democrats are trying to delay so that they can prevent the publication of any information. That's, of course, not going to happen. The Republicans will publish all their information. They'll release all the information well in advance of November of 2018 and January of 2019. If the Democrats were to take over the House, that would be a disaster from a public policy standpoint, and certainly for the president. I have no doubt that there would be a number of Democrats that would want to try and impeach President Trump. I actually don't know if they could succeed, even in the House, if it were run by Democrats. But if they did, they'd never be able to do anything in the Senate. It just wouldn't work. You have to have 67 votes to convict in the Senate. They're never going to get them.